You are standing in a restaurant in Paris. The waiter places a plate in front of you, delicate little legs, golden brown, crispy at the edges. You take a bite, and it is incredible. Tender, light, almost like chicken. You have just eaten a frog, and somehow the whole world agrees that is perfectly fine. But here is the question nobody asks. Why a frog and not a toad? They look almost identical. They live in the same ponds, they hop the same hop. You could find both in your backyard right now. Most people assume the answer is obvious, but it is not, because the real reason goes back further than restaurants, further than recipes, further than civilization itself. It goes back to the moment your ancient ancestors first had to decide what was safe to put in their mouths. And some of them got that decision horrifyingly wrong. Stay until the end, because the last part will change the way you look at something as simple as a puddle. Every culture on Earth that eats frogs has one thing in common. They draw a hard line at toads. The French eat millions of frog legs every year. China consumes more frog than any other nation. Indonesia, Vietnam, parts of Africa, parts of Central America. All of them eat frogs. None of them eat toads. That is not a coincidence. That is a survival signal buried so deep in human culture that most people never even question it. So what is the difference? On the surface, almost nothing. Both are amphibians. Both lay eggs in water. Both eat insects. Both breathe through their skin. Biologically, they are so similar that the line between them is almost a matter of opinion. A toad is not a scientific category. It is a word humans invented for the ones that look drier, lumpier, and more land-based. But nature did not draw that line for appearance. Nature drew it for one reason: poison. Here is where it gets serious. Behind each of a toad's eyes there are two swollen bulges. They are called parotoid glands. They sit right there on the skin, just above the shoulders, and they are filled with one of the most complex chemical weapons in the animal kingdom. Herpetologist Edmund Brodie Jr. spent decades studying toad toxins and catalogued what is inside. It is not one poison. It is a cocktail. Bufadienolides, which attack the heart directly. Bufotenin, which is chemically related to the same class as certain hallucinogens. Epinephrine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and a dozen other compounds depending on the species. The toad does not bite you, it does not spray you, it simply waits. The toxin oozes from its skin, and if something tries to eat it, that poison enters through the mouth and the eyes of the predator almost instantly. The heart begins to slow, the muscles seize. In a small animal, death can come in minutes. Imagine you are a dog. It is a warm evening in Queensland, Australia. You are nosing around the backyard. You find something squat and warty near the garden hose. You lick it. Within seconds, you are foaming at the mouth. Your eyes are rolling. Your legs are buckling. This is the cane toad, Rhinella marina, originally from Central and South America, introduced to Australia in 1935 by agricultural workers who thought it would control beetles on sugarcane farms. It controlled nothing, but it began killing everything that tried to eat it. Native quolls, goannas, freshwater crocodiles, snakes, animals that had evolved for millions of years with no experience of this toxin. They had no instinct to avoid it, so they ate it, and they died. Veterinarian Rick Speare documented cane toad poisoning in Australian wildlife through the 1990s and found that native predators were losing entire local populations, not because the toad hunted them, but because they made one simple mistake. They did not know the rule. Frogs, yes. Toads, never. Your ancestors knew that rule. They learned it the hard way, across thousands of years of trial and error. Evolutionary biologist Daniel Jansen wrote in 1980 about how indigenous food taboos often encode real chemical information about the environment. People did not understand bufotoxin chemistry. They did not have labs. But they had something just as powerful: memory. Collective memory passed down through generations. Someone, somewhere, thousands of years ago, ate a toad. Maybe they survived because it was a small dose. Maybe they did not. But either way, the story spread. Do not eat that thing. That bumpy one. The one with the lumps behind its eyes. That is what cultural food taboos actually are. They are ancient warning labels, encoded not in books but in habit, disgust, and instinct, and the frog versus toad rule is one of the oldest and most consistent of all of them. But here is what makes it truly strange. The line between a frog and a toad is not perfectly clean. Some frogs are poisonous. Some species that look like toads are not harmful at all. The world is not neatly sorted. So how did ancient humans actually learn to tell the difference? They used every signal available: skin texture, behavior, habitat, color, smooth, wet, fast-moving, lives near water. That is frog. Dry, slow, bumpy, wanders into your garden at night. That is toad. This is called heuristic classification. It is the same mental shortcut your brain uses every day. When you learn that red berries in a certain bush are safe, but red berries in a different bush are not, you do not memorize the chemical structure. You memorize the visual. Your brain built a category, and your ancient ancestors built the same category for these two animals, even though science would later tell us the boundary is fuzzy. The category did not have to be perfect. It just had to keep them alive long enough to pass it on. And it worked. Now here is where it gets even stranger. Some cultures did use toads, not for food, for something else entirely. The Sonoran desert toad, Encilius alvarius, also called the Colorado river toad, secretes a compound called 5-MeO-DMT from its parotid glands. This is one of the most potent psychoactive substances known to exist. Researchers at Johns Hopkins, including Alan Davis in studies published around 2019, found that a single exposure to this compound produces experiences that people describe as among the most meaningful of their lives. Indigenous groups in northern Mexico had documented ceremonial use of this toad going back centuries. They were not eating it. They were using its secretions in ritual. The toad was not food. It was a doorway. And this tells you something important. Ancient humans were paying very close attention to these animals. They were not simply avoiding toads out of ignorance. They understood that something in those glands was powerful. They respected that power. Some chose to use it differently, but nobody put a toad on a dinner plate. The frog, meanwhile, became a global delicacy precisely because it had almost nothing in its skin at all. Smooth, permeable, nutritionally rich, high in protein, low in fat, mild in flavor. The legs especially are almost pure fast twitch muscle, since frogs use explosive bursts of energy to leap. That gives the meat a texture unlike almost anything else, and frogs are abundant. Historian E.C. Bruman traced frog consumption in China back to roughly 3,000 years ago. French cuisine codified frog legs by at least the 12th century. By the time anyone was keeping records, frogs were already a staple in wetland communities across Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The world's rivers and swamps were full of them, and they were safe. That combination made them inevitable. But now consider what happens when the rule breaks down. Poison dart frogs, Dendrobatidae, native to the rainforests of Central and South America. Neon blue, blazing orange, electric yellow, beautiful. Deadly, skin-coated in alkaloid toxins so potent that a single frog carries enough to kill several adult humans. Indigenous hunters in Colombia scraped the skin of the golden poison frog, Philobades terribilis, across their blowgun darts. Researcher Gary Stiles documented this practice in the 1960s. This frog did not follow the frog rule. It was not safe to eat, so the people who encountered it did not eat it. They used it as a weapon instead, and the reason it is poisonous at all is fascinating. Poison dart frogs do not produce their own toxins. They get them from the insects and mites they eat in the wild. Remove them from the rainforest. Feed them a captive diet. And within a generation, their offspring have no toxin at all. The poison is borrowed, but it is deadly enough to change an entire culture's relationship with that species forever. So you end up with this strange map of the animal world. Most frogs, safe, all toads, avoid, some frogs. Weapons. One specific toad, ceremony. And your ancestors navigated all of this without a biology degree. They did it with pattern recognition, with storytelling, with disgust, and with the oldest teaching tool in human history. Watching someone else make a mistake so you did not have to. Here is the part that should make you stop for a second. When you walk past a puddle and feel a vague, low level discomfort at the idea of eating whatever is living inside it, that feeling is not random. It is not irrational. It is ancient, calibrated information. Your disgust system is one of the oldest circuits in the human brain. Psychologist Paul Rozin at the University of Pennsylvania spent decades studying disgust and found that the foods humans reject most universally are the ones most likely to carry biological harm: contaminated water or rotting flesh, unknown animals. Your ancestors taught your body what to recoil from, and they encoded it so deep that it now feels like instinct. The toad sits somewhere in that category for almost every culture on Earth, not because of logic, but because of grief, because somebody ate one and did not make it. And the people who loved them made sure no one in their community would ever make that mistake again. That is what culture is at its deepest level. It is not cuisine. It is not tradition. It is the collected survival intelligence of every person who came before you. Passed down not in textbooks, but in the things that feel obvious. The things nobody even questions. You do not eat toads. You do not eat certain berries. You do not drink from certain streams. You just know. But now you know why you know, and the next time you see a toad sitting still and swollen at the edge of a garden at dusk, looking almost like a frog, looking almost harmless, remember that somewhere in your biology, someone already learned that lesson. And they paid for it with everything they had so that you would not have to.